Welcome to Module 8 of the Inclusion of Special Populations training. Module 8 will focus on what many consider as key points of practice that may serve useful to test administrators and assessment staff in the reduction of assessment allegations. This module does not guarantee that allegations will not occur. The intention is to provide information that might assist and strengthen testing procedures in schools and districts. Slide 3 is one of 6 slides in this module that has been designed to highlight specific ways to try and reduce an allegation when administering a state assessment. Please do not think that these slides eliminate the chance for an allegation to occur. The purpose behind them are to shine the spotlight on areas that the Office of Assessment Accountability, along with the Office of Legal Services and allegation investigators, might see on a regular basis. This allegation prevention best practice tip is to always make sure students who receive accommodations with an IEP 504 or a program service plan have access to said accommodations routinely during instruction. The plan must be current or up to date, and in a very important area we often see is that when a roster is being pulled for testing purposes and Infinite Campus, that students may not pull if that plan is not locked. For someone who does not work with the student on a day-to-day basis, without seeing their name on that roster, they would not know to provide a particular accommodation or accommodations. That in turn often leads to an allegation. This allegation prevention or best practice tip is to make sure when a plan changes near the time of testing that it is documented well in the conference summary and that there is evidence that supports that change. Also, anytime a change to a plan is made, especially close to test time, everyone involved with testing, that student, needs to be made aware of those changes. It might be in the best interest to conduct a special meeting to discuss those plans before moving forward with any additional assessment practices. It is understood that plans may change at or during test time. It is best practice to make sure if any change does occur that there is supporting evidence to verify that change and that all parties involved in testing the student are made aware of the change before any further test sessions are administered. This allegation prevention best practice tip is to highlight specific training requirements and to focus on student refusal when receiving an accommodation on a state assessment. First, for anyone who is involved in a state assessment, they must receive the administration code training. For those providing or assisting with accommodations, they must receive the administration code and the inclusion of special populations trainings. Many districts do require both trainings to be completed by all test administrators and parties involved with state assessments. That is a local decision that may be enforced without the consent of KDE. A student has the right to refuse the use of an accommodation at any time. This is not uncommon for a student to refuse an accommodation, regardless of their reasons. At the point of the student making that request, the test administrator should cease providing that accommodation at that time. The accommodation should only be provided again at the request of the student that day. Make sure to document any time a student denies use of an accommodation and if or when they request use of that accommodation as the test moves forward. Now let's look at some ways to prevent allegations or best practices to engage in when providing a reader. A reader should never guide or direct a student to a correct response. When reading to a student, the test administrator should never change a test item or answer options, even at the student's request. A reread may be provided only at the request of the student. The only time the test administrator is permitted to reread something without a student request is when the alternate assessment is being administered. When providing a scribe, the test administrator or accommodation provider should always remember these important practices. A scribe should only provide the exact information that a student provides. All answers must be directed and guided by the student at all times. A scribe should only provide the writing support to a student when they have additional accommodations permitted on the test. For example, the scribe could not read a response back to the student unless that student had a reader on their plan. To make note there, you got to remember that the accommodation being provided is just the scribe, not the reader. Unless they were being provided both the reader and the scribe, then the ability to read any parts of that would not be permitted on the assessment. So to summarize that, in order for the reader in order for the scribe to read back to the student, that student would also have to be eligible to receive the reading accommodation. For this practice, first let's talk about oral native language support on state assessments. Flexibility to a test schedule on a state assessment is not permitted unless a student has oral native language support marked on the program service plan. If there is a shortage of interpreters, EL students shall use a different test administration schedule than the regular student population. The altered schedule must occur within the district established testing window. This is the only circumstance that would permit the altering of a test schedule. If the need to provide services through oral native language support and providing it in their native language required them to maybe test the session at a different time period. Still has to fall within the testing window, but it does not have to occur exactly at the same time as all other students taking that particular test. The second part here is paraphrasing and simplified language can be one of the accommodations that is the most misunderstood. The thing to remember about paraphrasing or simplified language is that it applies only to directions. Nowhere else on a state assessment can paraphrasing or simplified language occur unless it's just specific to the directions only. No content, nothing else, just directions. This concludes Module 8, Allegation Prevention Best Practices. If you have specific questions about the inclusion of special populations training, Module 8, or any module related to this training, please feel free to contact KDE DAC information at dacinfo@education.ky.gov or by calling 502-564-4394. Thank you for your time and participation.